Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Field Quiver Outdoors podcast. I'm your host, Jody Thibodeau, and it's my goal with this and every episode to help you fill your quiver with God and the great outdoors. For this episode, I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance. Some of you, actually probably most of you, may notice a discrepancy, difference in the volume between both myself and Wade during our conversation. We had a storm going on here where I was while I was talking with Wade, so I had my volume turned down a little bit more than what I realized until after the fact, but I've leveled it out about as well as I could get it. So don't let that take away from the conversation. There's a lot to be offered from what Wade has to say, so don't, again, let that little bit of volume difference prevent you from listening to the entirety of the episode, because you will gain a lot. I gained a lot from talking with Wade, and I feel that you will also benefit from hearing what Wade has to say, both about his story and background with the Sam's One Bug, as well as just having some fun with listening to another outdoor hobby that Wade has that you might not know about. But before we jump into the episode, don't forget, make sure that you are following the show, subscribe to the show, and have notifications turned on whatever platform you listen or watch me on. And that way you can get notifications whenever new content drops. Also, would be more than grateful for you to rate the show and leave some good reviews. That way perhaps more folks can find the show. And if you would also like to support the show financially, the way the show is supported financially is through sales on fieldquiveroutdoors.com and the web store, which right now through the end of the Olympics, in honor of the Olympics and the wrapping up today actually of the what has been a very historic Tour de France, use coupon code 24Olympics, and that'll get you 24% off any of the stickers that are considered athletic related. That's the Ichthus designs that are incorporated into the bicycles, the winged foot, which is typically relatable to track and field and cross country athletics, as well as the Ichthus that has the swimmer's goggles on, and also Swoley Bear, because he lifts weights and weightlifting is an Olympic sport. So, without further ado, I give you this great conversation that I had just a few days ago, actually, with Mr. Wade Blevins. Well, today I have Mr. Wade Blevins, and I know I reached out to you a while ago, and you were actually one of the first few folks that I reached out to about being on the show, and it's taken us a while, but we're finally making it happen. And just for the audience's background, I found out about Wade and Sam's One Bug because of the Redeye bass workshop, fly fishing workshop that I went to in 2023 that was hosted by the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. And as part of that workshop, we actually tied a Sam's One Bug. And after doing some research and looking into it, I stumbled across the Instagram account for Sam's One Bug. And Wade has been more than kind in responding to all of my questions about what to do differently, what to make it easier to tie these flies, what do I need to buy to tie them correctly. And he does have a very, very good instructional YouTube video about how to tie Sam's One Bug, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. But now, Wade, if you would, go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience and let them know what you think your claim to fame is.
I appreciate that. It's a pleasure being on with you, Jody. I know we kind of, like you mentioned, we went back and forth on this a while, and schedules didn't really line up, but I appreciate you taking the time to be with me today and do this interview. So it's an honor. as far as claim to fame, I don't know that there's really any fame there, if you will, but this is something I inherited. If that's probably the best way to put it. My father created this fly out of necessity. We both, gosh, I've been fishing for as long as I can remember. And when I was young, one of my first jobs was in a tackle shop, counting hooks and packaging hooks. And there was a gentleman that worked with us there at the time, him and his son both. And he made these custom balsa flies that were just incredible. They beautiful works of art. But even in the early '80s, those things were $4 and $5 a piece. And I've got a few of them hanging on the wall over here. They're all balsa epoxy, hand painted, signature on the bottom. His name was Walt Holman, and a lot of people still recognize him as one of the classics as far as balsa poppers and the designs that he did with the eyes and things like that. And that's where I get a lot of my, guess, stuff that I do today from is watching him do those bugs. And but Dad and I would go fishing, and my dad's eyesight wasn't great. And his hands weren't real good as far as grip strength, and sometimes he would overcast his fly, and it would either hit the walls on the seawalls on the lakes or the rocks, things like that, and the bug would come back chipped or cracked. And so, one of our conferences that we went to, the Southeast Conference for the Federation of Fly Fishers, was on Joe Wheeler State Park, and some of the guys there brought him some foam cylinders to try and make a different fly, and he thought this is going to be perfect. And so after several different attempts, he came up with this bug, and it was a very crude, simple pattern at the time. There are some pictures of him on my Instagram account, because it didn't really have all the fancy painting that I do on today. It was just a piece of foam and some feathers and a hook. But man, that thing caught fish, and he would catch 10 to my 1 on most days, and it just held up. He could throw it out there, it'd bounce off the walls, and took a lot of abuse, and the fish seemed to really like it. So after he passed away, I kind of took it on myself to keep tying those flies, and that's what I've been doing ever since. And it's more of a passion now than it is, a hobby or a recreation. And I think I've probably sent out somewhere between, gosh, I don't even know anymore, probably well over 15,000 flies all over the world. And, it's just something I love to do.
Okay. Well, that's awesome, and I will say, just from following your Instagram account, that you might not think it's a claim to fame, but you are a very good, very talented artist. In addition to your claim to fame, and we'll get into this a little bit later on, is the manner in which you give away these flies that you make. And just, I guess, as a little teaser spoiler, you don't sell them. You do not take money for them. You give them away for free. And like I said, we'll get into that a little bit deeper here shortly. But let's focus on the fly itself to start with. Give me the history of the fly.
And so originally this fly was tied on 1/4-inch foam, and the reason being is that was all we had at the time. It was called live body. Well, actually, it was just the center core of a rod handle before it became live body. And Wapsie picked it up and was selling it to Spirit River and several other companies as packaged foam cylinders for various ant patterns and bugs and hoppers and things like that. And it came in a variety of just a few colors. You could get yellow, kind of a dark red, a green, a black, a marbled color that was kind of a black and white and a little bit of gray. But that was really about it. They did have a few in blue every once in a while. It wasn't until later on that they started coming out in various other colors, like the chartreuse greens and whites and oranges and purples and reds and things like that. And he tied them on a very small, what would look like just a standard small streamer or nymph hook. But it was stout enough in the nymph hook to hold on to big bass, and that's what he wanted. You didn't want like a standard brim hook or crappie hook that might bend if it was a light wire hook. You wanted something that was stout enough that if it was playing a larger fish, it wouldn't just bend or break. And so the cool thing about it is the bug sat right in the surface film of the water. It didn't sit real high on the water. The original patterns actually had deer hair on the tail, and the tail would float higher up than the actual body of the fly. So we switched to the marabou because one, marabou would absorb the water, but once it sits in the water, that marabou tail just kind of moves around on its own. And it's not the most durable, but when we started adding crystal flash and marabou and of course the round rubber legs, there's a lot of times that the bug just sitting in the water in the ripples of a lake or a stream, it's moving, even though it just looks like it's sitting there, that thing's moving all by itself. And so a lot of times the reaction strikes were probably some of the most aggressive I've ever seen, because it just does the work for you. You don't have to do a whole lot. If it's not getting, my dad will always say, count to 10. If you're not getting hit, count to 10 again, and then move it. Because I was the one that I'd cast it out and I'd just start stripping it back immediately. But a lot of times he would cast it out, and just let it sit there, and they couldn't stand it. He said it was a matter of patience between the fish and the fisherman. And usually the fish would just absolutely annihilate it. And so since then, the foam's available in all kinds of sizes, from very small diameter to something that's like almost the size of a nail, if you will. It's I can't remember. It's 32nds, I believe, or 64th is maybe the smallest, and then it gradually grows up just like a ruler to 1/4 inch, 5/16, 3/8, half, and 3/4 half. And then you can actually get some in a full inch diameter, but it's hard to come by. But they use them for saltwater popping rigs, and so you can as long as you can find a hook that'll match the size of the foam, you can time it just about any size you want. I saw one recently down in Birmingham that they used as a display model that was tied on a foam pool noodle. So you just never know what it's going to come out to be, but you just let your imagination go. You can use markers and paint and use white foam, yellow foam, whatever, and you can pretty much change the look of the fly to anything you want it to be to imitate a particular pattern. And I think that's the versatility of it. Is if you really wanted it to mimic something, you can change the shape of the front to make it pop differently. You can change the color pattern to make it look like a different type of critter on the water. You add more legs, take more legs off, make it more like a bait fish pattern. And it's just very versatile. The key element to it that my dad kind of did a poor man's patent on it years ago was the head, the segmentation. So he had that trademark for a while, and it made it like a thorax, like a hopper body, by tying that front section off, and it just kind of made it so much different than the traditional popping bugs that were out there. And that's what kind of made it famous, was it looks more like a traditional hopper pattern, but being a popping bug.
Okay. Now, you said as far as matching the hook to the foam, for folks that might be new with fly tying, what's the best way to determine what size hook you would need based on what size foam that you have?
Two things. One, for the species of fish that you're going after. If you're doing a panfish pattern, typically that's going to be a 1/4 inch or max size 5/16 inch foam. And the hook gap is what's critical there, because if the hook's too big, the panfish are going to hit it all day long, unless you're going to someplace that has 3-pound panfish that are hitting on top of her. But that's where that smaller size hook, an 8, a 6, maybe a 4, depending on the hook style, the model number, that they can actually get in their mouth and be able to get the hook set well. If you're fishing for a larger species of bass, making sure that hook gap is at least the size of the foam, from the bottom of the fly where the hook actually mounts into the body to the actual barb or the hook bend itself. I try to give it at least the spacing of the size of the foam. On some flies, if I know I'm going after a larger game, then I'll actually double that and use a much larger hook, a stouter hook, especially for strike and when strike are busting on top and you're wanting something that's going to be a really more stout hook and you're looking then at like a 1/0 or maybe a 2/0 size hook on a larger piece of foam.
Okay. And you're naming off all these species that the Sam's One bug can catch. But when your father originally came up with this, was there a specific species that he wanted to focus on catching with this bug, or?
He just liked fishing. He's a lot like me. Now, his preference, um, when we got on the water, the last thing he wanted to have to do was spend time dealing with, cleaning off his fly or getting hung on weeds or things like that. And there's a little bit of a backstory to that is that he was a dialysis patient, so his time on the water was very limited because he was on dialysis 3 days a week at home, and that took up, on average, you had an hour to a half hour to get on the machine, 4 hours on the machine, an hour and a half hour to get off the machine. And so being a teacher during the week and doing that 3 times a week, man, it takes up a lot of your time. And every ounce of body fluid, your blood that goes through your body, gets filtered through an artificial kidney. So when he had time on the water, he didn't want to waste it. And we fished Gunnersville a lot, but over the years, the milfoil and hydrilla on Gunnersville grew so much that it was either always in the trolling motor blade or getting hung on the fly or things like that. And he really liked fishing deep water lakes that had bluffs or rocks because he didn't have to deal with that. It was clean, clear water, and you had the opportunity to catch some really nice bluegill or panfish, shellcracker, and long-eared, what we call pumpkin seed, and smallmouth too. And I think smallmouth was probably one of his favorite because he grew up wading the creeks in Missouri and Arkansas as a child. And his father and his grandfather all fished those creeks. And I think that's was kind of a passion of his, was smallmouth fishing.
Okay. And about when did he come up with his first prototype, if you will? Was it in the 80s?
It was. So we, started playing around with it in kind of 82, 83. But the actual fly that we really started tying was in 84. So the summer of 84. And
Okay.
He had done multiple different designs and he came up with several different ones. But 1984 was probably when he said, yeah, this is the only bug I need. I can fish with this all day long and catch fish on it. I don't have to worry about losing them. They're easy to tie. Simple pattern.
Okay. And I know you've said in at least one Instagram post that I've seen, his favorite color scheme was, and correct me if I'm getting this backwards, is the yellow body with the orange legs, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, he swore by yellow and orange, and I tied a bunch of them that were various different colors, and I still do today. But it was his go-to on everything. He said, I haven't found a fish yet that doesn't like yellow. So, and he caught trout, he caught crappie, brim, bass, almost every species of bass, even some drum, catfish, you name it. So it's been very versatile. I know I've got some friends that swear by chartreuse, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But if he was going to fish one, it was usually yellow with orange legs. That would be the first one he tied on. Now he did his close second for him was white with yellow legs or white with orange legs. Those two. He liked having a very contrasting base and leg pattern. I know a gentleman in Birmingham that's been a huge supporter for me. He loves the yellow with black legs, and he says that's really all he needs to because it's a high contrast. So that's Steven. So I don't know if you've met him or not, but he does great. There's a bunch of Stevens, I should say. But,
Okay. Well, now as far as your favorite color, I know you tie a lot, but is there a particular color pattern scheme that is kind of your go-to, the first one you're going to tie on?
Gosh, that really depends on the water I'm fishing. I would say more and more I'm throwing natural colors. I really like what I call the mud brown. Um, that that brown with a variegated leg that's either black and yellow or black and orange or black and tan or brown and tan. For some reason, they don't hesitate on that fly. They'll take it time and time again. There are times where blue has just been phenomenal. At days when they won't hit anything else, but they'll absolutely destroy a sky blue bug. And then for me, a go-to is always yellow. I mean, it's partial. I like the chartreuse too. I fish it often, but if I had to pick one out of a box, and it's the only one I could fish with, I gotta stick with Dad's orange and yellow. So that's going to be hard for me to beat.
Okay. And I know you've already mentioned, kind of vaguely alluded to uh, how the name came about for this fly, but if you don't mind sharing that.
Sure. Yeah. So we were out on the lake, actually on Wilson, and fishing. Take that back. We were on Joe Wheeler, above Wilson Lake, above the dam, fishing between First and Second Creek along the bluffs there. And this was probably prototype time. I think it was 1983, summer of '83. It was near my birthday, so I think it was just a few days past my birthday in May. And um, we went out one morning, and I kid you not, it seemed like back-to-back cast. He caught multiple smallmouth that were over 3 pounds apiece, several largemouth, a ton of brim and goggle. We call them greens, goggle eyes, and just he never had to change flies. And he said, it's crazy. I can fish this fly all day long, and I don't have to fish anything else. If they ever get to a point where they're not hitting, he put a dropper on the back or something and pick up fish that were, if it was raining really hard or water was stained and they were a little deeper, he could run a dropper behind it and made the perfect indicator. So he never took it off his line unless it just, the knot was broken or something. It was ready to go all the time. The rod was rigged with a one bug, and he said, I don't need anything else to fish. I've got one bug that'll do everything I need. And that's how the name came up. And then after he passed away, it kind of became Sam's One Bug through some friends of ours and through a gentleman that posted it up on a page through Flying Anglers Online as a monthly recipe. And he kind of alluded that it was Sam's fly. And then I just kind of ran with it from there after his death and just continued to call it Sam's One Bug.
Okay. And that's pretty much the story of the fly. And I know you go more in depth with the story on a couple of other interviews that you've been on, and I don't mind sharing, folks. I know you've been on the Storied Outdoors. I actually just re-listened to that one today, and there was Dad. I think it was Dad's on the Fly.
That's correct.
You talked with those guys, and so there's even more backstory there for the audience. Both of those are great shows that I enjoy listening to. But look up Wade and or Sam's One Bug and listen to those episodes. And we're gonna go a little bit different direction with this episode. But before we completely leave from the topic of the One Bug, there's just a few more things that I want to talk about, and the first is for folks wanting to tie the one bug, we'll talk about some tools and the ingredients for the recipe. But we'll go ahead and go with what is needed to tie one bug. So what supplies, materials do folks need to go out and pick up from their fly shop if they want to start tying one bugs?
All right. So first and foremost, I recommend a really good hook. A hook that you can depend on time and time again that's going to stay sharp. And I'll be honest with you, I have not found a better hook than Ahrex hooks. They are phenomenal. I've really grown to love their freshwater series hooks. They have a couple of different sizes that are. I really like the wet fly hook, which is a heavier, stouter hook. And as kind of how I mentioned earlier, because it's a stouter hook, it causes the fly to ride a little bit deeper in the surface film. And the reason that's important is if you ever watch a wasp or a grasshopper or anything like that hit the water, they're not sitting real high up on the water. They're actually down in the film, and when they kick their legs, it's making vibrations and little rings go out from that. And then when a fish is looking up at that fly, just kind of like if you ever seen underwater pictures of a dry fly sitting on the surface, a lot of times all you can see on the like traditional Adams or Royal Wolf or anything like that is the parts that are just barely touching the surface film of the water. But when this bug is sitting in the water, it kind of does the same thing. The body of the fly sits firmly down in the water. Then you don't really see the legs on the side of the bug, but where they touch out on the side. It kind of comes down, so it makes a really interesting impression on the water. And I think that's what helps it a lot. So a good hook is critical, first and foremost. The foam you can buy from several different locations. I get most of my foam from Brandon Jackson at Riverside Fly Shop down in Jasper, Alabama. He's been phenomenal, helping me get a larger quantities of foam. I try to buy everything I get in bulk because I get a better rate that way, and as many as I'm tying, it makes sense. If you're only tying a few at a time, maybe a couple dozen, and really all you need is a small bag that has 4 or 5 pieces, maybe 6 pieces in it, a couple inches long, and then you can cut those in half most of the time and get two bugs out of one piece of foam. So the traditional size is a 1/4 inch foam. You can find it in a variety of colors. The 5/16 is becoming more and more popular. It's kind of, if you can find the 5/16 or the 3/8, that's more along the size of the traditional poppers that you'll find out on the market. And so that size and the Ahrex hook match perfectly, especially on size 6 and size 4 hook. The medium round rubber legs, I prefer the round rubber because the action on them to me is a little bit better. They also don't slide through the foam as easily. The flat rubber legs or square legs, the fish will tend to pull on them from time to time. I'm not a huge advocate of putting super glue on the legs. Some people do, but if you fish with it for multiple times, that super glue will actually end up being a breaking point, and it'll dry rot over time or cause it to crack, and those legs will break off. And then if you're out on the water and you want to repair a bug on the water quickly, it's difficult to get that leg back through that hole that had super glue on it. So if you have a leg come out while you're on the water, you can run a threader through, put a new leg in, pull it back through, trim it to the size, and you're done. I mean, it's just a quick, easy way to get them back. You can do multiple legs on the bug. I will say, if you add more than 2 legs on each side of the bug, say you put in there 6, 8, 10 pairs of legs to make it like a Mr. Wiggly or something, the only thing that I would recommend there is making sure that your leader size matches the fly, because if you have a lot of legs on there and you're casting it in the air, as lightweight as it is, it's going to spin and it'll cause your leader to twist up. So make sure that you're fishing like a 10 or 12 pound leader, just so it's not doing that, to match it up and keep it from spinning around like that. A couple other things that you're going to want for the fly recipe are a good marabou. I really like using the tips of the marabou, not so much the whole feather. a whole feather will work great. You're welcome to use that, and it makes it actually look the fly look buggier. But if you're trying to sell to people, which I'm not selling, but if you're trying to present a pattern that looks good, the tips are cleaner. So I groom it out to make the tips look nice and even. It's kind of like tying a deer hair tail, or stacking your deer hair to get all the tips even and stuff like that. It's very similar. Then some kind of flash. Some people don't like the flash, but crystal flash, I like it because you can get it in a pearlescent or various colors that match whatever color bug you're tying. It's not real expensive, but you can find packs of it. And just a couple pieces is all you need. It doesn't have to be a lot. So one pack will last you quite a long time. Flat foam is an option. 2mm flat foam or craft foam that you can buy at Walmart or Hobby Lobby, and just cut into small 1/4-inch strips that match the size of the foam itself. I use those as indicators on top of the fly, because on low light conditions early in the morning or late in the evening, especially if there's a place where the light is shining in your face, like if you're sitting in a boat and the sunlight is facing you, like on a sunset or something, that bug can be difficult to see in the water without some kind of post on top. So just putting a little wing on there, you'd be amazed at how much that makes that stand out on the water. Even if it's just a small one, it just helps the visibility a little bit better. It's not necessary. My dad would argue that it's not needed because he honestly never put one on there. Then the last thing is I use markers or paint to actually detail the fly. And just plain old Sharpie markers. Use a light color on the bottom. I like the fluorescent ones because they really stand out. And then use a black to fill in for the eye on the top. And everybody does that a little differently. Some people just put markings on. I really like to do the eyes. So that's kind of my signature thing. And that's pretty much it. I mean, you got a good hook. Super glue would be the other thing. I've experimented with a lot of different super glues over the years. We used to use a product called Quick Fix. It was a dental hygienist glue that you would put in there and then spray it with an adhesive that would heat up the glue. And that was the only way to really get the old live body to seal. Nowadays, you can use all kinds of different types. I prefer the Gorilla Glue in the green gel. And the reason being is it's a water-based glue. And so water just strengthens the bond. And it works great. I've yet to have any problems with it at all. That's pretty much it.
Okay. And as far as any tools, I know with us back and forth on Instagram, and people can see you actually have a specific video for how you paint these eyes on. You have made some tools of your own. If you don't mind sharing what those are.
So this is a trick that I learned from Walt Holman, and it's actually in a recent book that I picked up too. I don't have it right here beside me, but there's actually a whole book on poppers now that's fantastic, and he mentions this in there too. And you can buy dowel rods, you can buy little brass bars at any kind of hardware store, or whatever you need. But what I did was actually went and picked up a piece of oak dowel rod, cut it into sections, and I don't know if this is going to show up or not on here. I have them numbered just for my own sake, just so if they're sitting in a little bin somewhere, I know which one's which just picking it up quickly. And they're numbered 1 through 4. Number 1 is your base pattern, and all these are different size nails. And so what I did is I took a small drill, drilled into the top of the dowel rod, and then drove the nail in there, and it's going to hold itself. I've never had one come out. But each one is a slightly different diameter. The one being the largest, slightly smaller, and then down to a really small one. And what that does is if you put your first dot on the fly, and I will say if you're going to put paint on the flies, you need to seal the foam first. I've found there's a lot of different types of sealants out there. You can find some on Amazon. I just go to the local hobby store like Hobby Lobby or Michael's, and I use what's called Delta Creative Ceramicoat, and they sell a bottle of sealer that is a waterproof sealer that basically fills all the pores in the foam to keep it from just adhering directly to the foam. It gives it a base or a surface to put the paint on, much like painting a wall. If you're going to put a paint on, you put a primer on first. Same kind of thing. So then from there, you can use pretty much any kind of acrylic paint, whether you want a flat paint or a shiny paint. And goodness, and nowadays they have any color you could possibly imagine in paints, from fluorescent to glow in the dark to stuff with glitter in it. Even your just basic colors in red, yellow, and blue, you can mix to make whatever color you want. Whites will lighten it, so you can make pinks and all kinds of things. But the biggest thing there is I usually end up putting, depending on the color of the foam, I usually do a black dot first, and then I'll go to the next size down and I'll do either like a yellow or an orange, or if it happens to be a blue bug, I might use a blue, or I'll use a white on that next size down to highlight it, depending on the color of the foam. And then the third one is going to be either the color that I want to match the foam or something similar, or a highlight to make it look like a real eye, if you will, on a fish or a frog or whatever. And then the very last one is just another black dot to create a pupil. And so what you want to do is, as you progress them, you put your first dot on, and then you use that center spot from on the edge as where you're going to place your second dot. And every one after that is going to be on that same location, and it just gradually goes smaller. And you can move that center dot around. You can put it on the front side to make it look like the fly is looking backwards. You can put it on the top, make it look like the fly is looking up, or put it on the bottom to make it look like it's down, or even facing forward. Or you can just put it dead center, right? So there's all kinds of combinations you can use. I've been looking at the ones that Walt did over the years, and all of his face forward. And he said, because if a fish thinks the bait is looking at them, they might turn away from it. If the bait looks like it's looking away or scared, they're more likely to attack. And he said, I don't know how much truth there is to this, but he said bass will attack the head almost 9 times out of 10. They're going to attack the eyes and the head first, and they'll swallow it that direction. So a lot of times you'll see fish with their tails sticking out of another fish's mouth. So there might be some truth to that. I don't know. But once I get the paint on there and you will have to let each piece dry first, put it on a wheel, let it spin, let it dry. A heat lamp does help, or if you have a blow dryer or a heat gun, you can speed up the process. If you're going to do that, I really recommend doing multiples at a time. It makes it a lot easier. But once they're all dry, then I go back and put a varnish, which is the same company. It's Ceramicoat by Delta Creative. And I'll put a single coat of varnish on there. When it goes on, it goes kind of opaque. And then as it dries, it becomes really clear and shiny. And then in order to get it waterproof, you have to do at least 3. I really recommend 4 coatings of it, because with just 3 coatings, if you go out and fish it too soon, the water will actually absorb back into it, and it'll make it kind of cloudy. But once it has 4 coats on it, it's had time to sit in the sun or sit out in the light, it's almost like epoxy at that point. The varnish is not going to wear off, and it might chip off with the teeth on the fish over after you catch 100 fish or so, but it's not going to wear off real easily. But that's pretty much it. That's it's just a simple process. You can do the same thing with the back end of a paintbrush, or Q-tips. There's all kinds of things out there that people use. You find different size dowel rods, and you can actually use the dowel rods to do the same thing with. They make them in good sizes for balsa as well. A couple other tools you mentioned. Tools. One thing that I use all the time. This is an X-Acto knife that the top of it just untwists and you can take the blade out. And then I've got a number 10 sewing needle in here that I use, and I put Velcro on the back end as a dubbing tool. So I use this whether I'm tying one bugs or trout flies or bass bugs, whatever the case may be. One is it gives me more control when I'm pushing holes through the fly. Two, that thinner diameter needle keeps the legs from sliding out. There's a whole bunch of leg pullers out there today that you can buy that have a big, nice burlwood handle on it. But the problem is once you push that through the foam, that hole that goes through the foam is huge. And a lot of times if you don't put a piece of super glue there on that, those legs are just going to pull out. And so using that smaller diameter needle and pushing it through the foam, and then using just a standard threader. This is they come 3 to a pack. It's just got a little red head on it and a wire on the end. You can run this through that hole on both sides, put your rubber leg through there, pull it back through. Some people will wet it just to make it a little easier to come through there. But these threaders, I don't know how many packs of these I have, but I go through them all the time. But I use those 2 tools every single time I'm tying a bug. And I really like having that X-Acto knife because I can control it in my hand. I can apply pressure if needed, not having to push with my thumb to try and get a needle through or try to work just a standard needle through. And most of your bodkins are going to be a thicker, the traditional bodkins are thicker steel or thicker metal. And so this just allows me to use a much smaller diameter on that. The other thing that's important is razor blades. When I'm tying these, I had a gentleman that sent me some jigs recently to allow me to cut them at the right angle, and then this just slides down and through the top and allows me to cut the center groove easily without having to hold it in my hands. But I really like these flat edge because on this side it's just a standard flat edge. On the other side it's a really sharp blade. You can pick these up at most hardware stores in packs of 5 to 10. This is like a carpet blade cutter, and it's just or either that or you can use it as like a straight edge for different things. I don't know what all tools actually use these, but I think these were $7 to $8 a pack. You can find them sometimes on sale for like $1.50 when they get a little rust on them. They'll dispose them and put them in the sale bin. And that's when I try to find them at places like Mike's Merchandise or even at Walmart from time to time. But I prefer using these because it allows me to hold the phone in one hand and make a slice right down the middle and control it a little more accurately. And then the last thing, and this is one of the things that my dad picked up years ago. He bought a whole bunch of them at Mike's Merchandise in a box that actually must have bought 1,000 of these things. And they're a stainless steel with a rosewood handle, and they've got a spring compression on them. You just squeeze them, they open them up. And the reason I like this is I can put this on the phone, close it, and it causes all the glue to squirt out through the top of the crack there once you cut that piece in, and I don't have to sit there and use my fingers or hold it with my hand and potentially get super glue all over my fingers. And then when this thing does get glue on it, gets kind of cruddy, I can take that same razor blade and just scrape the glue out of the center here, and then just not have to worry about it. So it's I've got multiples of these, and I use them all the time. Other than that, your basic tools. You want a good pair of scissors to trim the foam if you want to cut it, right in the middle. I really like the Martorelli whip finishers. Just being able to whip finish over the head of the fly makes it quick and easy for me. And then a good bobbin too, something that's going to hold the thread. And that's one thing I didn't mention on the materials list earlier. I've used a lot of different threads over the years, from UTC, Flymaster. Here lately, I'm using the Vivus thread, and it's a great thread. I have to be a little careful with it because it's so strong that if you put too much pressure on it, it'll actually cut through the foam. So, but it's phenomenal stuff. And thread's kind of like the foam color. You can find it in every color imaginable, and I've been told many times all you need is white because you can take a colored marker to it and change it to whatever color you want. But I've got a good collection of different color foam, so that's pretty much it. It's a really simple pattern to tie.
Yeah, and you mentioned a jig. And I actually just saw that video on your YouTube channel today.
Yeah.
And I'll put a link to your YouTube channel here in the show notes, and that way folks that are more interested want to actually see how these different things work. They can go watch your tutorials on how to tie the fly, just in general, and then you also have a separate one that goes a little bit more in depth into how you apply the eyes. But this other video is relatively new. I think it was showing that you posted it a few weeks ago. But I don't know if you want to mention that jig or not, or just have folks go to the YouTube channel and watch your review of it.
Either way, Eric Fail sent that to me, and he did a custom 3D printed jig, and it makes it really handy, really easy for cutting the foam, especially for people that aren't used to doing it. It's kind of like the River Road creation type jigs that are out there. And I know there's several different styles that you can get, but he's selling these. And so, reach out to him. I think his Instagram account is at X_fails or fail X_fail, FEIL, I believe. If that's incorrect, I'll fix it. But you can find him on there. He's following me. You can probably find him on my account too. So, but I know he'd love nothing more than to send some out to more people. So,
I'll
definitely
go
reach
ahead
out to him.
Reach out and make sure he doesn't have an issue. I doubt he will, but mention him in the show notes so that people can find it.
That's great.
But then before we move on to the news segment, there's one thing that, like I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, the way that I think you've taken something that your dad did with giving away these flies, but you've made it your own way of giving away these flies, and you use it as a way to share the gospel. And if you don't mind, I know a lot of the audience would love to hear the backstory on that as well.
Sure. So my dad would use the flies to barter, mainly to get access to ponds he wanted to go fishing, or property or things like that, or if he had a friend that was a fly fisherman and had access to a special place, he'd ask if he could go along and bring some bugs and some lunch, and make it a package deal. And I don't ever remember him selling any. He may have at some point. I don't recall, but I remember him giving them away all the time to people, and he got a lot of joy out of watching people catch fish on bugs he made. And I ran a fly shop for a few years, and when I started tying them myself, for not only just to give to friends to get them get started to catch their first fish, I experienced that same kind of joy. And watching them just have a blast catching tons of fish on a bug it's just a neat thing. But when he passed away, it was it left a hole in my heart. I'm an only child. Spent a lot of time with both my parents, them both being teachers. We were off in the summers, and he was definitely a mentor to me. I looked up to him for just about everything. I don't know. I was a late believer, if you will. I did not come to Christ until later in my life, and we always kind of live by the golden rule, if you will. Just try to treat people well and do good. And many times, people kind of thought of me as a little bit of a goody two shoes, I guess, growing up. And but I still, like anybody else, I got into trouble and did some things I shouldn't have, and got into some stuff that with dirt bikes and everything else, going places I probably shouldn't have been. But I started working for a company here in Alabama, and called Cook's Pest Control. years ago, and the gentleman that was owned and ran the business back then, um, he shared his testimony in a classroom environment with about 40 other people in that room. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't like you have to do this or you have to pray this prayer, or, if you don't go to church, the devil's going to get you, those kind of things. It wasn't anything like that. It was a personal relationship that he had with his Savior. And it was obvious in the way that he managed and handled himself. Um, it was evident that the people that he put in that area at the time, because we had just moved to Decatur. There's several different people that were involved. A good friend from Canada, his name is Eugene Banks. He was a videographer at the time that was working for the company. And then other people that became friends that were involved with the group too, and kind of got me involved in Bible studies and churches. And so we started attending our local church here, First Bible Church on Spring Avenue here in Decatur. It's a non-denominational church. We kind of follow the Baptist convention. But I was baptized in December of 2001, and that was a change in my life. I felt the Lord's presence and just calling upon me to be something different. And after my dad got back into church, and my mom started attending church, and he got really sick and passed away in 2005. And I realized then that there was an opportunity for me to use this bug in my newfound love for the Word and for Scripture to be able to share what happened to me and the change that I had seen in my life, of not only my personality and who I was and just the way I handle myself, but to be able to share that with others through this gift, because that's exactly what Jesus Christ was for me. Is he died for my sins, and he is the perfect gift. And so now when I give out these bugs, I give out the gospel with it, and the fact that he chose me. He came to me and chose me long before I was ever created. And it's humbling, It's one of those things that I'm so, I don't even know, I look at it and I think, gosh, by the grace of God, anybody who believes can be saved by what Scripture says, right? And so if we just believe that he saved us through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ and what he does today to intercede for us on our behalf, because sin as a general rule separated us from the relationship with God. It goes all the way back to Genesis, and Christ came to rectify that sin. I can't die for your sins. You can't die for mine. Well, no matter how good we are, even if we try to live by the Ten Commandments, it's impossible. Christ in the Beatitudes tells us time and time again, look, if you think that you haven't fought with your, or killed somebody, which is one of the Ten Commandments, well, if you went after your brother with evilness in your heart, that's the same thing, and it's, so he goes through this whole process of what all that is. And if you really break down the Ten Commandments, it's two things. Love the Lord your God, and then love others as yourself. And, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to love the Lord my God first and foremost in anything I do. As long as I put him first in my work, my life, my marriage, my beliefs, then what have I got to worry about? And if I'm wrong and he was a lunatic, as some people want to say, then so what? I'm wrong. But if I'm right and he's exactly who he said he was, then what have I got to lose? I've got everything to gain. And just as Scripture tells us, to die is to gain. And with Paul, I mean, that's the ultimate thing. So for me, this is a way that in this crazy world with everything that's going on, I can share a passion about what I love outside of my work, which is going and fly fishing in a small stream somewhere and catching these amazing fish that God created, and helping somebody else do that too. they might be having a stressful day or a stressful time or stressful just experience in life in general. And if I can take them away from that for a moment and get them out on a body of water and help them catch their first fish on a fly and share this with them, then hey, I mean, that's what it's all about. So that's why I give them away. It's a free gift, just like the free gift of Christ. And that's pretty much it, I guess. It's an easy way to sum it up.
And that's a very, very powerful story. And I know I'm probably speaking on behalf of many folks when I say thank you for doing it in the way that you do it, and using it as a ministry. I mean, that's you found your way to share the gospel and spread the gospel, and as many as you've sent out, there are no telling how many lives have been impacted. Not necessarily just the ones that received the flies, but the lives that they impacted.
Right.
But I mean, that's just amazing.
It
And
can be discouraging, but I've had so many people tell me, Wade, you'll never know how this has impacted someone else's life until years from now. And, I can count on one hand, probably the number of people who've reached out to me and said, hey, this changed my life. But, I'm just here to be a friend. And if I can encourage somebody, and I would recommend everybody get a Bible of your own. Get one that is something that you can read and understand, and just read through it and see what you think. Because I'm telling you, the words will change you. They'll change your heart. And if you just seek what God is providing, He'll change you. And it's I don't know. I'm very passionate about that, but there's a lot of people I've sent them to that I know that they're just like, oh, that's trash. They're just going to reject it. And Scripture has words of advice on that as well. Foolish are just not going to be able to see it. They're not going to hear it. They're not going to want to listen to it until God opens their minds and their eyes and their heart to be able to receive it. And at that time, I know everybody is. I shouldn't say everybody. I know I've seen people who have changed. I know I follow a guy on Instagram that's out in Texas, and I watched his transformation, and what all he posts now and the way he's changed his life. And it's like, gosh, this is amazing. And that's exactly, why wouldn't you share something like that with people? If you know it has the ability to change someone's life for eternity, why would you hold on to that? Why would you keep that to yourself? So many people need to hear it and to know that there's hope, to know that there's so much more to offer. It's, this life is just a wisp. It's going to pass by so quickly. And there's so much more to gain from just trusting in the Lord.
Yeah. And I say it's very powerful. It's a very powerful message. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
And hopefully it's reached somebody in the audience that maybe motivates them to go out and find their own way that they can share the gospel, and not be concerned with necessarily seeing the fruits of their planting the seed here, but knowing that it's at least been planted, and not be overly concerned about what happens with it, but that would keep them from doing it anyway.
Yeah.
But
and I would encourage anybody, hey, if you're listening to this, or if you catch wind of it through another source and just happen to hear this and you're struggling, reach out to either one of us. I'm sure Jody would feel the same way too. Contact me through Instagram or through this or wherever. And, Jody's got my contact information. I'll be happy to talk with you. I've been happy to pray with you. Anything you need, if there's something I can help somebody learn more about it or guide them through the process, I'll be happy to.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are right. Reach out to me. You can do it here through this, through the podcast sources, through the website, Field Quiver Outdoors website, or just shoot me an email or Instagram or Facebook. I will say on Facebook I'm bad about not getting the messages, but Instagram I usually get those as soon as they're sent to me. But we'll go ahead and move away from that, and almost feel kind of awkward moving from such a serious part of the conversation to a little bit more lighthearted. But we're going to go ahead and move into this new segment that I'm going to do since the show reboot, called Drop in the Bucket. And with that, what that is we're asking the guest, when I have a guest on, when it's not just me that you're having to listen to, what is something that is on your bucket list, your outdoor bucket list, that either you've already done or you have yet to complete, that you think might be of interest to the audience that they might not have thought of in the past?
So I've never been out of the country. I say that. We went to Jamaica for our honeymoon 30 years ago. But outside of that, I've never been overseas. And so, on an outdoor level, I'd love to go on a mission trip and be able to go see people in different parts of the world and talk to them. But I've watched a whole group of following recently, especially here in the last few weeks. I'm getting more and more followers from Japan, and they have smallmouth in Japan, and the water there is crystal clear. It looks like something out of a dream. And, man, I'd love to go to Japan and go smallmouth fishing on topwater boats. So that's it's kind of maybe a far-fetched bucket list, but definitely something I'd like to try sometime. I'd like to go to Iceland too. My dad always said that was one of his all-time favorite places, and go visit the guys at Arex in Denmark. So,
yeah, that sounds kind of like my dad, but he's going the opposite direction. He's still staying in country, but he's always wanted to go fly fishing in Alaska. So, but I don't even know that he's made it further out of South Carolina than Texas when we went to visit a school that I was thinking about going to in college. But yeah, so thanks for sharing that. So if you're looking for ideas for your bucket list and you're an international traveler, or you want to be, then maybe consider going and catching a smallmouth in Japan. And so now, just one other thing that I want to do different with the show, with this reboot, is you're known for your flies, for your fly tying, for the one bug. But what is another outdoor hobby that you have? And we'll just talk about this for a few minutes because we're going on about an hour now, which I'm not worried about time. I don't know if you've got anywhere you have to
no,
go.
I'm good.
I mean, I've got to be at work in the morning, but it's still early enough. I'll have plenty of sleep for that. But what is an area that is something that maybe you've started later in life that you're still learning, that is just a hobby outside of fly tying and fly fishing that you enjoy, that maybe you can share some of the challenges or struggles that you've had with trying to pick up this hobby?
Interesting. So a few people probably know this, but many don't. I got into disc golf pretty heavily. And so, a lot of people think I'm a little crazy for throwing plastic at trees. But that was something that my uncle started with me years ago. There was a disc golf course in Huntsville, Alabama. It was the second or third in the nation that was built in the 70s, late 70s. And we would go out there with just a plain old whammo Frisbee and play around. And then I met some guys that played it professionally later on, and they introduced me to it. And I kind of walked away from it. Never really even thought of it again. I got involved in sports other than that all through high school and part of college. And then coming full circle when kids were born, we were just looking for something to go do that was inexpensive, but got us outdoors, got out in the woods and different places, could travel. And we got and picked it back up and got into disc golf, and my boys loved it. And we became competitive at it. I joined what's called the PDGA, the Pro Disc Golf Association, and we had our numbers. What's kind of unique about PDGA is once you get your number with that group, it's your number for life, and nobody else gets that number. And so me and my boys got consecutive numbers all together, which was kind of cool. If I'd done it years ago, it would have been in the low thousands, but it was kind of neat now to see the growth and how many disc golf courses there are now across the nation. It just, especially when COVID hit, man, it boomed, and a lot of ball golf courses have kind of gone away, and disc golf has picked up. But starting that kind of as an older guy, it was, I wouldn't say difficult to get into, but watching these young kids throw disc, 400, 500, 600 feet, as a guy that, could barely get it 300 feet in the early times, it was difficult, and so I had to learn some different things, get a little more flexible, and, change the way I was. It's like golf, you have your drivers and your mid ranges, and you have putters, and so it's just a different sport. But I would highly recommend, if you've never tried it, at least get out and try it one time, because the sound of that disc hitting those chains becomes addictive, and it's good activity. You get to see some really beautiful places, and like I said, it's really not expensive. For maybe $20-$30 you can go buy a few discs and get out, and most courses, I would say 90% of the courses are free. So there's a few that do cost you a little bit of money to play, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know. And you bringing that up, I probably need to take my kids now there. We tried once. I took them one time, and I mean, they were way too young for it, and they didn't even know how to throw a Frisbee from the get-go. But now that they know how to throw a Frisbee, I probably ought to take them again, because I played a little bit in college, not much,
Okay.
but we had some friends. We would drive when I was in Charleston, and we'd play a course there in Charleston, and on weekends, every once in a while, we'd drive up to Orangeburg and play, and there's one hole that I just refused to. I lost so many discs in the water. And I was like, I'm just skipping that one from now on. But that made my encounters with it rather expensive. But no, that's definitely of encouragement to folks. From what you're saying, just pick it up and do it.
Just try it. Yeah, the Carolinas have got a ton of beautiful courses too. So, I mean, y'all have got probably some of the largest number of courses, I think, around. So there's definitely a huge following in that area.
Oh yeah. And now we'll just move into the last segment of the show. This is one that I kept. I just kind of tweaked it a little bit, which is the Me Too, just to let the audience learn a little bit more about you and what they might have in common with you in terms of interest or thoughts on different things. And there's 3 questions. I've changed it around. I've dropped it down to 3 questions that I ask everybody. And I'll let you pick. Just if you want to, you can go ahead and give me 2 numbers now, between 1 and 15, and that'll round out your 5 questions.
Okay, number 4 and number 12.
Okay. And I'm actually going to do a bonus question, 2 bonus questions for you, just because I'm curious. I'll bring those up at the end, but we'll start out with the everybody questions. First one is, what is your favorite Bible story?
Oh goodness. Wow, that's huh. So I think for me, it's probably about Paul on the road and seeing Christ on the road, because I mean, the way that it explains is Paul was persecuting Christians for years. He wasn't a believer in the Jews. He was actually persecuting Jews, and killing people. And on his walk, he was confronted with Christ in his walk, and immediately bowed down, and became a believer, and changed. And when he came back when people were bringing him back in to say, "Hey, you got to meet this guy," and they're like, "Hey, I know who that guy is. I don't want him to be anywhere near us. He's going to kill us," And when people realized what had changed in him, and how he had changed, and then to go on and be such an instrumental figure used by Christ and used by God, to share the gospel and to share the message, it makes it that much easier to understand the power of what Christ can do for people. And if you think you're down and out and you're never going to amount to anything, trust me, a little bit of faith goes a long way, and he can change anybody. No matter what you've done, no matter what's happened in your life, no matter what sins you've committed, you can be forgiven. And there's only a few things in Scripture that tell you that, hey, this is unacceptable. But anything else, Jesus can bear that, and he has, and he will. So I think that's probably my favorite. Is just the story of how he changed Saul to Paul, right? So
yeah. Up next is a outdoor question. So, what is a must-see for you, nature or creation-related destination? It can be a park, a museum, a trail. That is actually a 2-part question. One that you've already visited, and one that you would like to visit.
So I've got a couple there. One that just we went on a business trip to California. Took my wife. We rented a car, drove 4 hours to go to Yosemite National Park. As we came up the mountain, just the climb to 9,000 feet at the top of the mountain into that little bitty city that had been there for years was beautiful in itself, and just a different than what I'm used to here in the South. But then coming back down from that 9,000 feet, when you come into the entrance of the park, you're at about 6,000 feet elevation. And then as you drive down into the park, when you come into the tunnel and you exit out that tunnel and see the valley for the first time, it'll take your breath away. It is just awe-inspiring. And John Muir and the people that have written about it, it's like anything. If you go to the Grand Canyon, you can't understand how amazing it is until you're standing there on the edge of it. And to think that the valley floor of Yosemite was 4,000 feet, and I live in a town where our tallest mountain is a little over 2,000. It blew my mind. And all of that stone and those face cliffs and the domes and the waterfalls and just the valley itself and those gigantic trees, it was incredible. It was a life-changing experience. I'd go back in a heartbeat. And then the other place is probably not real well known, and it's local to Alabama. There's actually a couple of places here in Alabama. One is called the Dismals, and I know that sounds terrible, but it's a small canyon near Russellville, Alabama, and there's a creek that goes down through there. And for the longest time, it held the two largest trees in the state of Alabama, and the tallest trees at the time, and they got their tops blown out in a tornado. But there's a creek that runs through the bottom of it, and these massive, massive stones that are like have fallen off the face of the cliffs and create these shelters. But they have a unique glowing algae on the rocks there in the summer evenings, and that place is just absolutely stunning. And then kind of tied to that is Little River Canyon in Alabama. If you ever in Alabama and you get a chance to go, it's the fastest descending canyon for length anywhere in the nation, and it is absolutely beautiful. And there's a rare species of redeye bass that are in there that you can't find anywhere else, and they're just beautiful. And as you well know, you talked about the Bartrams, which is a species of them as well. And it's a gorgeous, gorgeous river with a lot of waterfalls and a lot of white water.
Okay. Now, what's a place that you would like to see that you've not yet been to?
So I guess top of the list there, I really want to go to Canada. My parents have been in the past, and see the Canadian Rockies, and maybe fish some of the streams that are there. I think a lot about all the brook trout that are in Labrador, and pictures I've seen years ago when Lee Wolf was fishing these huge like thunderhead and wolf dry flies for brookies that 5 and 6 pound brookies coming up and eating a dry fly. I mean, that if that doesn't get you excited, I don't know what does. So that's someplace I'd like to go.
Okay. And what is, and you've actually kind of already answered this one, you might not realize it, but an outdoor slang term that either you use and you've had to explain to somebody before, somebody's had to explain to you, or just a fun term that you use for something that you think you would have to explain it.
Oh gosh, an outdoor slang term?
Yeah, because I know you mentioned what did you call? You were talking about the different species, and you called one of them. Was it goggles?
Oh, goggle eye. Yeah.
Yeah, goggle
so
eye.
green ear sunfish. I don't know why we called them goggle eye for years. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's a good one. Um, this is going to sound terrible. You ever heard of saddle sop? So whether you're bike riding or playing disc golf or whatever it may be, if you're sitting in a canoe and it's 102 degrees outside, at some point you're going to end up with saddle sop.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's one me and my friends have thrown around a lot.
Okay, I got you. See, I should know that one from doing cycling in the past.
There you go.
But all right, and then I'm gonna go ahead and do these couple bonus ones that are just for you, just because I'm curious. But
Okay.
one of them is you've mentioned the redeye bass, and I mentioned the Bartrams, which is a subspecies of the redeye. Have you done the mobile basin slam? Have you completed that yet?
Well, technically yes, but I don't have the Bartrams. So and I never took pictures of all of them. But I've got the Warrior, I've got the Tallapoosa, I've got the Cahaba, and the one with the orange fins in the Chattahoochee. Is it the Chattahoochee? We actually caught it over in Georgia on a trout stream of all places. But
okay.
So anyway.
So yeah, and we're talking Greek to some of the audience now, I know, but basically what we're talking about is this particular slam is catching each of the multiple distinguished species of the redeye bass. And then the other bonus question for you is, just because I'm curious, if you were to tie a fly other than the Sam's One Bug, and you were to do it as we'll just say as a display piece or as a gift to somebody, what fly do you think you would enjoy tying the most, aside from the One Bug?
I used to do a lot of deer hair. That was kind of my thing back in the day when my dad was tying one bugs. I'd go to the shows with him, and I spent a lot of time sitting next to some long gone, just incredible deer hair artists. That it's I learned more from those guys sitting there watching them tie, just time and time again, and they just kind of took me under their wing and helped me learn it. So I really enjoy stacking, spinning deer hair. I've done quite a few displays for friends over the years and put them in little glass boxes or domes and give them away as gifts. And so that's probably been my thing. I've tied a lot of Christmas trees over the years, and that are kind of a realistic looking tree, various mice patterns that I would take milk bone biscuits and break off pieces of them, make it look like they were eating a milk bone, that kind of stuff. So I think that would, if I had to just pick something, it'd probably be tying something creative out of deer hair. That's what I've always enjoyed.
Okay. And so you picked for your numbers to round out the 5 that ended up becoming 7.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. No, it's on me because I was curious about the slam and the fly, but so I added those extra ones. But the first one you picked was number 4, which is, and you can choose or you can answer both. It's a kind of a two-parter. If you are currently reading a book, what are you reading? And if you're not reading something, or if you want to elaborate in addition to that, what is your personal favorite book that is related to an outdoor or creation topic of all time?
Okay. Well, we're avid readers, my wife especially. Right now, just as a couple different things, I've got some required reading with our church, and then but just as a kind of enjoyable read, I'm reading a book called The Cartographers. It's about a girl and her father who died mysteriously, but they were map makers essentially, or they studied maps, and there's some history that goes along with it with the New York Public Library and all the different maps that they have. And it's a little bit of a mystery and a little bit of fiction, but so far it's been a really good book. And then I'm also reading a book on eldership, on just what's required as part of a 9-mark series on eldership, and just is something that is, I guess, more towards the spiritual side. As far as an outdoor book, this is going to sound kind of crazy, but one of my all-time favorite books is the Curtis Creek Manifesto, which is a very simple read, but it's got so much wisdom in there about what to do for different types of things and type of fishing. It's almost like a cartoon book in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of great wisdom in there. That would be a top one. The Old Man and the Boy is a good one too. There's just so many. I could go on and on and on. I'll send you a whole list. How about that?
That'll work. All right. And then the last question is, how do you get your caffeine fix? Coffee, energy drink, soda, or are you a decaf man?
No, it's definitely coffee, but I have to kind of watch how much caffeine. But I'm one of those guys that in the morning I've got to have my coffee, and so my son's kind of gotten that way too. He's got just about every known device in the world to make a cup of coffee. So I don't, I'm not that picky. I just want a good cup of coffee.
I got you. Well, I appreciate it, Wade, and
thank you.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've learned a lot, And if you do want to share that list with me, then I'll probably share it with the world on the between the website and Instagram also for other folks looking for some good reads.
Okay.
But before we go, I just we've been back and forth between serious fun, serious fun, serious fun. I'm going to end on a little bit more of a serious note, and something that I like to ask guests who are fellow believers is how can the audience and I pray for you? How can we pray for Wade?
That's a good one. Wisdom. I just not only in just business and life in general, especially on what to do with this bug going forward. There's been a lot of conversations over the years, and just it can be overwhelming at times with the number of people that are requesting them, and I know probably people are like, man, I'll never get a bug, or it's taken too long. He's probably forgotten about me. And I will say, hey, if you've reached out to me and you've not received a bug, and it's something that I've responded to, and you still haven't gotten it, by all means, reach back out to me, because the mail system, I don't have a lot of faith in them lately. It's amazing to me the number of packages that have either gotten rerouted or lost or sent back with partial stuff in them. But if you have not received one, reach out, and I will try to do my best to get it back out to you. My list continues to grow, and it can be overwhelming and discouraging at times, especially I've got 4 kids and a wife, and responsibilities at church and responsibilities at work, and I work all day long, it seems like, and every day, and it just never ends. And so that's one of those things that just for energy, and being able to continue this well, and to just be able to encourage people as well. I want to continue to be able to share the gospel, and it's one of the reasons I haven't given the bug to various companies, is I'm just not sure that would continue to be done if it was. I've had opportunities in the past, and so just that the devil wouldn't get in the way of that. That I'd be able to one, have the funds to be able to continue to ship them out and send them out to people, because it can get expensive. And if I take too much time to dwell on it, I often look back and think, gosh, I could have put a kid through college with what I've spent on that. But I also know that it's not my money. It's the Lord's, and He'll do with it as He pleases. And so if I just, as you mentioned earlier, and if I just get a couple of people that are saved from this, and it changes their life, then it's been all worth it.
Well, I'll definitely add those specific topics to my prayer list. And
thank you. Likewise, if there's something I can be praying for y'all as well, let me know.
We'll do it. And just kind of going along with that note, you mentioned the funding, and I just want to give you the opportunity, if you'd like to take it, how folks can reach out to you to help you in supporting your ministry if they would like to do that.
That's huge. Thank you. So I've got to give a shout out to Arex Oaks, because they came alongside me and it really helped me out there with one of my most expensive materials, right? And so they have supported me in ways that I never thought imaginable. So that's been a huge blessing. But as far as if people decide that they want to help me carry on the message and continue to see more bugs put out there, I do have a Venmo and a PayPal account. I would say, if you're a first-time person that's never had a bug before, don't feel like you have to pay me. If it's something you want to help donate and support the cause, great. I greatly appreciate that. It helps with the expense of shipping. It helps with the expense of materials and my time, but I'm not in this for the money. Um, I'm more about sharing the message and maybe making somebody's day. I mean, in this crazy world, there's more things that go on every day that can just hot the brain. So if this gets somebody outside and active and they catch fish on it, then they're having fun, right? And so I would just say, hey, if you want to help support me, by all means, you can check out those links, and I'll make sure that they're available. My PayPal is just my email address. It's waiters9493 at Gmail. The Venmo is at Sam's One Bug, and I think there's hyphens in between each one. And at some point, we might look at setting up a GoFundMe page or something like that if it really ever gets to a point where I just can't handle the amount requested. Because if you start looking at what it takes to tie one on a time wise, there's just not enough time in the day to complete the entire list at times, and so it's just a little bit at a time. Just building that process and getting them out to people.
Yeah, and I'll get those links, get the email in the Venmo and the show notes also. And anybody else, if they wanted to go above and beyond that, just reach out to Wade through Instagram or by email, and keep an eye on his Instagram account also. He'll occasionally put things up there. I know I purchased a print from you back last year, I think it was, of a bass that you drew a while back, and it's very nice. And
well, thank you.
I think you still have some stickers.
I do.
The Sam's One Bug stickers,
Yep.
and that are pretty cool.
I just got a few in the other day of some bluegill and one bugs, and then of course the old SDP style can, and a couple of little red eyes too. So that's kind of an alternate hobby, is drawing and painting sometimes. So.
But yeah, just keep an eye out on his Instagram. Make sure you're following him, and get those notifications. And like I mentioned earlier, I've never once seen Wade on any of his posts ask for anything. It's always been, if you want one, reach out, let me know. And I think the closest he's come to that was probably saying, hey, if you buy this, then it helps support what I'm doing over here. But again, Wade, thank you. I've enjoyed it. I know the audience has as well. I will speak on their behalf this time. But maybe in the future we can do this again, talk about some other topics. Maybe once I figured out this disc golf thing, and I know before I started recording, we were talking about you guys homeschooled your 4, and we're about to go down that road ourselves this year with our 5. So, but yeah, again, thank you, and
thank you.
For the folks that want more about Wade and about the Sam's One Bug. Again, check out those show notes for the links to Wade's YouTube channel, his Instagram account, and then I'll mention the other podcast that he's been on, where you can hear some other stories from Wade's background about his life growing up and the One Bug itself.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, man. Appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know it's running a little bit long. I think we're running on an hour and a half here.
Oh yeah,
I
that's fine.
tend to talk too much, so.
No, it's fine. It doesn't bother me. I mean, it's, again, like I said, I've enjoyed it. So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to let me be on the show.
Oh yeah, it's been my pleasure.